Hi everyone. Today I want to talk about child protection laws. Um, we're seeing the truth coming out about paedophilia all across the world and how this has been an age-old problem and is still a problem and is still not being addressed by the laws that are passed in countries worldwide. I believe one of the reasons is in this world we have a so-called religion where a child can be married at as young as 6 years of age. So there are many governments don't want to take on that so-called religion and their practice and culture of that barbarity. So in effect, it's child rape, and it's allowed by that religion. So I'm being a bit hard hitting today because I just want to get this out of my system. It makes my blood boil when I hear of all this paedophilia because the Irish government took away 3 of my children from me forcibly, not based on any allegations of paedophilia, thank God, but based on some very petty allegations. So I have the experience of the Irish law system and how it works for so-called child protection. I do feel that children are not at all being protected. I think the laws are worded so vaguely that it is extremely hard to. It's almost like word games are played in courtrooms, and things that are minor offences are made out to be major offences. It's kind of like that saying, you can make anything out to be really negative if you want to twist it in a certain way. And that's what happens in the court system, unfortunately. Hearsay evidence is entered so that if someone doesn't like you or has a grudge against you, they can claim that there's some wrongdoing, which may actually be a complete lie. In my case, I have a former husband who said that he said this to a guardian ad litem, which is supposed to be the voice of the children, that you would never know what's going on in that house, something along those lines of wording. And he implied that there was something along the lines of sexual assault or that going on in my home. So the consequence of that was that 2 of my children were put through sexual screening assessments and it turned out that their knowledge of sexual stuff and that wasn't beyond their age, which would be a sign that they're, a trigger that there is some wrongdoing going on. But just it shows that when someone says something nasty, when someone has a vendetta against you and they say something that's totally false, that can have terrible consequences on your case, because you can be accused of something that you're totally innocent of. And your kids can be put through ordeals which there is no need for them to be put through in the first place. I can remember one day in Access, my kids mentioned a film, and I said, I hope that stuff that you're watching, this is in the foster home, is not over 18s, because I was very fussy about my children not being exposed to any kind of sexual stuff on television before, when they're very young. So and that was used against me in court, that I was overprotected. Now, you see, we've got to come to a point where we take the really serious offences and do something about them and make the laws that people think twice about hurting children. They really think twice because the consequences are so severe. Now, that's not happening in child protection. It's simply not happening. The wording of the laws is so veiled in ambiguity that it doesn't even say in law what is child abuse, what is child neglect, so that anything can be made out to be child abuse or child neglect. And there are bullies in the public services, unfortunately, who jump on that, and they will twist anything to make it out that it's child abuse or child neglect, when it's not at all. We need to get to the core issues. Is a child being harmed or hurt in their home? If it's not by the parents, by a relative or someone, why is that child not being protected? Let's get back to protection of the child, and it's, I don't know, it's kind of like going round in circles all the time, because the politicians do not want to pin down exactly what's the definition of child abuse and child neglect. But that's what we have to do. We have to pin down, define what the child abuse and child neglect is. So then at least parents know these are the parameters, these are within which you can operate. I mean, there was at one time in Irish law the defence of reasonable chastisement. If you give out to your child, if you slapped your child, you could use the defence of reasonable chastisement, that you didn't go overboard, it wasn't excessive, your discipline of your child. That was removed. All reasonable chastisement has been removed. So the balance is not there anymore, it's not fair on parents, because parents need to be able to enforce a small bit of discipline, I believe, when they're raising their children. Because as adults, they need to understand that there are morals in our society, and there are lines that you don't cross. So, and that understanding, if you give it to a child when they're young, then they understand that they grow up having moral values, that there are rules of behaviour, that you cross lines and the consequences, because it's a natural theory that there's causes and effects. So, parenthood is not all roses in the garden, and we shouldn't be trying to make out that it is all roses in the garden. And I just would like to see the legislation really, really tackled, and the people who are perpetrating really, really horrific abuse and harm on kids are brought before the courts and brought to justice, and the children's lives made safe, because this thing is, of people getting away with raping children, murdering children. It just can't continue. We can't continue with that as societies. And then there's families where there's, small errors on the part of the parents, and they're just being persecuted, because I have the first-hand experience of that, and it's horrific, it's not fair, and it just can't continue, I believe there are many incidences where the wrong children are being taken from the wrong homes, and then there's homes where there are cases of really, really horrific abuse and neglect, and they're just being brushed under the carpet, or they're being, maybe because of wealth or because of status of the family, so we need across the board the laws to be applied to everyone equally. So there's the principle of equal before the law, and we really need to see that enforced. So thanks everyone. I got that off my chest. Bye bye.